Hello, YouTube. With the recent events in Syria, I want to bring your attention to one fascinating but still very cryptic case having to do with the USO, unidentified submersible object. It involves not the only now extinct USSR, but also the United States, and the deep secrets of the underwater paranormal phenomena that are not going to surface anytime soon. This case was recently available in the Russian internet. Let me share it with you. Add some of my comments as needed, and add a few comments from the Russians who have discussed it. And I think you will like those comments too. In the spring of 1967, the 5th Mediterranean Squadron of the Soviet Navy was stationed in the Syrian port of Tartus. This was a retaliatory measure, according to the Soviets, after the United States deployed 10 submarines with ballistic nuclear missiles in the Italian port of Augusta. According to experts, their launch could cover up to half of the territory of the USSR. Naturally, such a threat had to be leveled somehow, but it turned out impossible to fully do so. Nevertheless, the Soviet command tried to secure the territory of its country as much as possible. Admiral Igor Kasatonov, a former commander of the Black Sea Fleet, also believes that the squadron was created to fend off the nuclear missile threat from the U.S. nuclear submarines deployed in the Mediterranean Sea. It was disbanded on December 31st, 1992, immediately after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But at the end of April 1967, the passions reached their peak. And it's not even about the mutual threat between the USSR and the United States. The situation turned out to be much more interesting and complicated. While in the Syrian port of Tartus, Soviet submariners detected a signal during combat duty on the K-431 submarine. Someone got in touch with them. Attempts were made to contact the crew of the detected object, but no response was given to all requests. The Soviet command assumed that the Americans had violated shaky agreements not to move closer and had actually arrived in the waters of Syria. No one else could do this except the Soviets' geopolitical enemies. To teach the arrogant Americans a lesson, a combat submarine was sent to the given coordinates with the sole purpose of destroying the enemy. Having reached the point where it was possible to locate the signals, the commander of the Soviet nuclear submarine reported the incredible. An object flew out of the water and began to approach the submarine at the speed of a high-speed torpedo boat. When it was about 200 meters away from the rendezvous point, the object dived underwater and passed under the belly of the Soviet submarine. The speed of the movement was so high that there was absolutely no possibility of pursuit, and no one knows what it was. The top Navy command insisted on admitting that the submarines had observed a mirage and temporary clouding of consciousness. But the signals were tracked, and the object was clearly visible on the radars. From April to May 1967, 3 more similar cases occurred, and each time the captains of the submarines reported on an incomprehensible flying vehicle moving at great speed. The command understood that there was no technical capability to destroy this facility, so to say, and by hook or by crook, tried to conceal the existence of a third unidentified party to the conflict. Rumors began to spread that this was the latest American technology. But much later, it turned out from archival data that the American submariners stationed in Italy also repeatedly recorded objects sailing at speeds up to 450 knots. They also surfaced and tried in every possible way to confuse the Americans. Curiously, both sides of the conflict showed remarkable patience and did not allow these objects to provoke a nuclear war. Igor Maximovich Barclay, captain of the first rank, claimed that in 1967 there was some fear among both Americans and Soviet submariners because both were faced with something technologically more advanced, and no one could guarantee that it was not a top-secret weapon directed against submariners. Later, in 1976, an extensive network was created under the USSR Navy by decree of Commander-in-Chief Admiral Gorshkov. Analytical groups were formed in the fleet, which brought together both civilian and military vessels. Their main task was to track unknown underwater objects along the route and further systematize the data. This network existed until 1986, and hundreds of cases were collected and documented. They were studied in the secret departments of the Navy and the Ministry of Defense of the USSR. The results of the research have been classified for at least 50 years, and no more information has been disclosed yet. Now, let me add some. To learn in detail about the top secret UFO and USO research conducted by Soviet Navy, please read my book, Russia's USO Secrets, available now in 7 languages. My co-author is Philip Mantle, whom I wish a speedy recovery. This man has done so much for the development of international ufology. It's hard to measure, and his knowledge is deep. His contribution to UFO research is so much greater than the dubious modern so-called experts, retired and know bureaucrats who stagger from one talk show to another and mumble about disclosure and so forth. You can also learn about some aspects of the research that I mentioned. You look at the video titled "The Ghosts of the Oceans." You will find a link in the description to this video. Let me share with you now some interesting comments about the subject. Judging by the facts and fragmentary information, analytical groups are still working today. So the person who commented, he refers to what I have also heard about, and I gather from my research that this is so, but it's complete secrecy darkness. Yeah, there are groups in the Russian Navy doing this research today. I don't think they really ever stopped. Even in the darkest days that followed for the Soviet Navy, when the Soviet Union fell apart, and they had no aim, and there were so many developments, but I'm sure there were people that never abandoned the search for USOs in the Navy. Next comment. It's a painfully tasty morsel that mysteriously flies and dives, but we're unlikely to know the results. Next comment. Nothing unusual. My cousin has seen more than that. I don't remember the circumstances in which this happened. About 7 UFO units were spinning around the ship. They were all glowing. They went up and then dived under the ship. It was a sight to behold. Next comment. Sometime in the 1970s, Kapitsa invited Senkevich to his show, and the conversation turned to UFOs. And Senkevich told about several UFO sightings in the Atlantic Ocean. And he told the audience which ship he was on and who else saw these UFOs. Now, let me clarify to you, Western audiences, and I'm sure in other parts of the world who listen to my videos, the more the better, from India to Zambia, from Finland to Australia. I want more people to find out about Russian and Soviet, before that, UFO and USO research, and what they found out and what they knew. So, in the Soviet Union, they had a main intellectual television program titled "The Obvious is Incredible," Очевидное невероятно, for 40 years of which it was hosted by permanent TV presenter Sergei Kapitsa, physics professor, until his death. After his death, the program ceased to exist. Popularization of science has become his life's work, and he himself is an example for all those who continue to engage in science journalism today. And Senkevich, Yuri Senkevich, was a Soviet physician, scientist, and candidate of sciences, that's PhD equivalent degree. Senkevich became famous in the USSR and worldwide for sailing with Thor Heyerdahl on the Ra expedition. On June 1st, 1965, he was selected into the medical group 2, along with Evgeny Ilyin and Alexander Kiselyov from the USSR, for the long duration Voskhod flights in space, all of which were subsequently canceled to make way for the Soviet moon program. All three were dismissed at the beginning of the following year, but he continued his career in the field of the Institute of Medical and Biological Problems of the Ministry of Public Health. From 1966 to 1967, he participated in the 12th Soviet Antarctic expedition at the Vostok Station. Please remember, that's very important for, I'm sure, my further research when it comes to the Antarctic. In 1969, third Heyerdahl invited Senkevich to sail on the Ra Papyrus boat, and later on Ra 2 in 1970. Yuri Senkevich also sailed on the Tigris across the Indian Ocean. In 1973, Senkevich began his career as a host of the Travelers Club, Klub Путешественников, a show on Soviet Central Television. Over the following 30 years, he visited more than 200 countries as a journalist. So I value the words of Senkevich more than those of various retired US bureaucrats who claim to have worked in various secret agencies studying UFOs and mumble about. When scientists like this mentions that he observed UFOs and USOs and presents data, it's very important. And look at the year when it was, how many decades ago. Anyway, I doubt that the Americans, those retired ones, know what happened in 1967. But I do know that the Americans and the Soviets, I'm sure, learned something about the strange USOs of the Syrian shores. When we will find out about this, I have no idea. I work with open sources. But maybe somebody can pursue this too further and try to find out what has happened. But again, I'm not holding my breath on this. This is what I wanted to let you know today. Thank you for your attention to my work. I'll bring you more interesting stories from the history of Soviet and Russian UFO and USO research. Please like my videos, please subscribe to my channel, please tell others about my work. Thank you.